What's up guys, Andre here, and today I'd like to show you the basics of building mobile apps with React Native. Out of all the mobile frameworks that allow you to build mobile apps using web technologies, React Native, in my opinion, is the most mature. I'm going to assume you have some knowledge of React. If you don't, you can still follow along, but I highly recommend learning the basics of React first. I have a series on building a basic to-do app, or you can learn it from the countless other available online resources. So let's jump right into it. Let's get everything installed locally, have a simulator running, and then we'll take a look at some of the components we can use. Then we'll build a very basic Reddit clone using Reddit's API. Now there are two ways you can work with React Native. So if we go into the documentation here, if you go into getting started, we can either use the quick start or we can interact with native code. So we'll be making use of the Create React Native App, or CRNA for short. What this does is it relies heavily on another framework called Expo, which sits on top of React Native. The way I describe Expo is it makes the React Native experience very web developer-like and tries to hide any details of native development away from you. You just fire up a command on the CLI, use a simulator, and it's very similar to, say, building a web app with React. The disadvantage of this is that some libraries rely on native code, so you can't use them with CRNA. If you want to use these libraries, you are going to have to eject from Create React Native App. This is something you have to do eventually anyways if you plan to publish your app on the app stores. So for me personally, I have no native mobile experience, and the apps I build are just web-based CRUD apps. So I really prefer the Expo CRNA way of creating React Native apps, and I try not to eject for as long as possible. So that's what we'll be doing here. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing you should do is install this command line tool, the Create React Native App. So just npm install -g. And I already have that, so I won't be doing that. And see if I have what version I have here. Okay. And for me, I also had to install Watchman. So brew install Watchman if you're using a Mac. So I have that installed already, so should be good. Okay, so let's go ahead and make one. I'm going to call it React Native Example. Okay, so that's done. It says to cd into that folder. And you can do yarn start, or I'm just going to do npm start. Actually, no, I'm not going to do npm start. I am going to be using the iOS simulator. So you need to install Xcode, which is a pretty straightforward process if you're on a Mac. If you want to use Android, you're going to have to install Android Studio. And you also have to set up the Android simulator from within Android Studio, which in my experience wasn't the greatest. That's why we'll be sticking with iOS. So once you have Xcode installed, that should automatically install the iOS simulator, and then you can just do npm run iOS. Okay, so that's running now, and you see it running in the simulator here. So oftentimes I have an Android phone, and I run the iOS simulator, and I run it on my Android phone as well. So what you can do is download the Expo app, and then once you have that, you can scan this QR code, and the app will be running in your actual device. So that's a good way to test both if you have an Android phone. So here's the code that the CLI scaffolds out. As you can see, there's very minimal files here, as Expo tries to hide everything, which is nice if this is your first time doing mobile development. So all we have that's interesting is this app.js file, and this is what you see in the simulator. So as you expect, if you change something here, save, this automatically refreshes, just like how we have in building web apps. So let me quickly go over how to debug the simplest way, which has been enough for me so far. Let's do a console log here, actually right here. Hello. And if you just save that, and if you just bring up the terminal, you can see your console logs here. But if you want to take that a step further in the simulator, hit Command D, and you'll see some options here. You can toggle the element inspector, and you can inspect just similar to how you do it in Chrome. Or if you want, you can hit this debug remote JS option, and that's going to bring up a window in Chrome. And if you bring up DevTools, you can use DevTools as you're used to it. So you see the console logs there, and you can use this to debug if you like. Personally, like I said, I've been getting away with just console logging and viewing it in here, so that should be fine for you. Okay, so in React Native, there is no concept of external CSS files. So the most common way to do CSS in React Native is CSS in JS. So you would do something like this. You define a variable and call this stylesheet.create, and you can define your styles in here, and then you can use them in here just like how you would use classes in a normal web app. So I'm going to be doing that and probably just doing inline CSS and JS as we go along here. All right, now let's talk about the components that are available to us. So in web, these would be divs, spans, unordered lists, etc. You can't use these elements as they are meant for web. Instead, we are limited to these components listed in the documentation. So there are a bunch of components we can use here, and let's go ahead and start using them. So a very basic one is just, it's already used, the text component. So let's go ahead and make another one. And let me just erase that, and let's make some state, just how we would do it in a normal React app. So let's make one called message, say I am state, and then we can just refer to it here as we normally do. So this.state.message, and there it is. And the next one, let's grab an image. Pretty straightforward. So I'm just going to grab an image using a web URL. So I'm just going to copy that. We're going to be making use of images later, so I'm just going to put it in here for now. And can't find variable image, so we have to import that. So put it here. There you go. Next, let's add a text input. So text, handling text input. So let me just copy this. Go back to our code. Let's import a text input. And it's pasted in under the image here. Let's not use the placeholder, and let's change that to the value. So the value is going to be that state we created, this.state.message. And I also want to set that state every time we type into that text input. So I'm going to set the state here with message and the text. All right, let's see how that looks. And let's give it a few more styles here. Let's give it a border color, light gray. Let's also give it a width. Let's put that here. Width of 200 or something. And I think we have to set a border width of 1 for that to show up. And let me turn wrapping on. And there you go, cool. So as you change text here, that changes as well. The state changes and that text we had earlier changes, cool. All right, now let's add a button. Let's look for buttons here. And here's how it looks in Android, and here's how it looks in iOS. You can style it if you'd like, but you're going to have to use another component to control the background. So we'll just leave it as default for now. And maybe in another video, we'll take a closer look at CSS. So let me just grab this, and then we'll stick that in our code here. And I'm going to take this out, and let's make a method called handle button. And this changes to my button. So go up here, let's do handle button equals arrow function. And let's change the state. So this set state. And we'll just change the message. We'll say button was clicked. And that should work. Where's my simulator? And we have to import it. So I'm just going to put these on their own line. And I'm going to add button here. And this has to be this handle button. And there you go. It updates the state. Cool. Okay, now let's take a look at a flat list. And as the name implies, it allows you to render out lists. And here is a minimal example. So I'm just going to copy this and then use that in our code. Let's put it right underneath the button. So this is a hard-coded list that it's going to render. And this is what it renders for each item in that list. So let's go ahead and use flat list up here. And that should work. And there it is. So it seems to have screwed up the CSS, the default CSS. So let me just put a padding top on all of this of, I don't know, 40 or something, 30 or 40. We'll see if that works. That would be a bit more. Okay, that's fine. Okay, now let's make use of our own list here instead of this hard-coded one. So I'm going to paste in some code and put it in our state, which is just a list of countries. And we have a name and we have an image. And this is taken from my other video on native script with Vue. And it just makes for a nice list of things which we can play around with. So back to our list, instead of this hard-coded data, we can use this.state.countries. And then I'm just going to put this on its own line. And then instead of item.key, it's item.name. See how that looks. And now you see this warning here. So if you go back into here, there is a prop called key extractor. And this will let you define the key. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's just do key extractor equals item arrow. Let's just use the name. That should be okay since we don't have an ID. That's cool. And okay, the warning is gone. And I don't want this list to be centered. So I think if I just take out these two. Okay, that's better. And I also want borders in between each item. So we can actually add another prop here on this flat list. And that's called an item separator component. So just do item separator component. And then you can assign it to a method that returns JSX. But I am just going to assign it to an arrow function and just do it inline here. And this is going to be the JSX for the actual border. So we'll just do something like this. View we'll give it a style. So we'll give it a height of 1. Give it a width of 100%. And then we will give it a background color of light gray. And let's close this out and see if that works. Sorry, my simulator keeps disappearing. And yep, that worked. And let's just give some padding here. So style equals padding, say 10. Okay, that looks better. Is this scrollable still? It is. Cool. Okay, so these items also have images associated with them. So let's go ahead and add the image to the left of it. So to do that, we're going to have to wrap this text component in another component because there has to be a root element here. Okay, it doesn't work like that. Let's do it manually. So if we just do that, this should still work, but now it's wrapped in a root component. Okay, and now we can make use of Flexbox. So this is going to be the flex container, and then we'll have 2 flex items. And let me just grab the other image we have from up here. And let's paste that in. See how that looks. Okay, see, they're on top of each other right now, but if we use Flexbox here, so let me just show you. So if you just set the flex direction to row, because it's actually column by default, unlike in web. So let me set that to row, and let's set align items to center. Then that should automatically go next to it, and it does. Cool. So now let's set the image. So instead of this, let's set it to, what is it called up here? It's called the image source. So it would just be item.image source, and that worked. Cool. Let's make it rounded. So we're gonna have to set the border radius to half of the width and the height. So that would be 25. Cool. And let's give it some padding on the left of 10 maybe. Okay, that didn't work there. Let's just try putting it over here on the actual container. Okay, so that worked. Cool. Actually, let's give it a padding of 10, not just the left. Okay, that's better. Okay, now I want these items to be tappable. And as I tap them, I want them to go to another screen. So let's go ahead and do that. So right now they're not tappable. So to make something tappable that's not a button, you can make use of the touchable, let's look for it, touchable opacity component. So all we have to do, as you can see, it responds to an on-press event, just like buttons. So all we have to do is change our view here to a touchable opacity. And I'm not sure why this one didn't change. That should have changed automatically. And let's use that here. Okay. And everything should still work. And it does. But now we can respond to that on-press event. So let me just put this on its own line. I really should use prettier, but I haven't gotten around to setting that up yet. Okay, so on-press is, let's make it an arrow function because I want to pass in an argument. So I want to call it handle list tap. And I want to pass in the item so I can grab that from the other screen. So let's go ahead and make a function called handle list tap. So I'm going to grab this. handle list tap. That's going to take in the item. And for now, let's just console log the item.name. And let's see if this works. So I'm going to tap this. So, yep, there it is. Australia, Belgium, Bulgaria. Cool. So now I want to make use of multiple screens, and the most common and the most popular way to do this is using React Navigation. So let's go ahead and pull that in and start to use it. So we can just npm install it. Grab that and do that. Okay, that's done, but we have an error. So I think we just have to npm install everything again, and that should fix it. Okay, so I stopped the console here and I reran npm run iOS, and now everything's working. So let's go ahead and use this React Navigation. So the way it works is it wants to take over your main entry point. So we're going to have to rename everything we've been working in to another name. So let's call it home screen.js. I'm just going to rename it home screen.js. And let's go ahead and make a new app.js. And let's import create stack navigator from React Navigation. And let's also import this home screen we just changed from home screen. And this is where you define all the screens in your application. So we're going to export default create stack navigator, which is a function. And then here is where we define all our screens. So we'll name the one we have called home, and we'll give it the home screen. And we'll add another one later on, but this is the only one for now. And then here in this next object is where we set the initial route when the app starts. So initial route name is going to be home because we only have one. And hopefully this works. Okay, let me just refresh this, see if this works. Okay, so it does work. Cool. So let's add another screen so we can transition to that other screen. So I'm just going to grab this. Just going to grab everything in here. Actually, let me just duplicate this. And I'm going to call it another screen.js. Actually, I forgot to change. Sorry. This should be home screen now. Home screen. And the default should be, export default should be home screen. Okay, never mind. It exports it already. And this should be another screen. Okay, let me just delete some stuff here. We don't need the countries. We can keep the state. We'll delete this. And let me just delete everything here. And we'll just have a text component. And that should be good. Okay, now we can navigate to that other screen from our main screen. So let's go ahead and right here where we just console logged, we can grab the navigation from the props. So we can do this dot props dot navigation dot navigate, and we can give it the other screen we want to navigate to, but I forgot to set that in here. So in here, we can add a new one. New one for the other screen. So just do that. And let's not forget to import it. So it'll be another screen. And that should work if I didn't mess anything up. And there you go. It goes to that other screen and there it is. Cool. Okay, so I want to pass in the name of the country to this other screen and have it show up here. So to pass props, you just have to pass in a second argument here. And in this case, we're passing in the name. And it's going to be item.name. And then to make use of that prop in the other screen, we can just grab this dot props dot navigation dot get param, and then we're getting the name, and you can also put a default one if you can't find it. What is wrong with my wrapping? I don't know why I have to add it every time. Okay, so that should do it. So Australia, and there you go. Belgium, there we go, cool. Let's also add a go back button. You can use this, but let me just show you how to do that. Just make a new button here. And we are gonna set the title to go back, and the on press is going to be arrow function, and all we have to do is call this props navigation go back, and now we can go back. Cool. Okay, now let's make use of the Reddit API, and we can pull the latest posts from a subreddit and display it here. And as we click it, it will show a full-size image. So I've done the same thing in my other two videos for the mobile frameworks. So let's go ahead and do that. So if you're not familiar with Reddit and how their API works, you just go to any subreddit. I'm going to make use of this one. And if you append .json to the end, then you can get all the JSON information for all the posts that shows on that subreddit. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to make a new state here called posts, and we'll set it to an empty array. And we're going to make an AJAX call, and we're going to call it on this component will mount lifecycle hook. So I'm just going to use fetch. You can use anything you want. I'm just going to use fetch so I don't have to install a third-party package. HPS reddit.com/r/aw.json. And then we have to grab the response and change it to JSON. And the data is going to come back. And then we want to set the state. And we're just going to set the posts. So posts gets data.data.children. And let's just console log to make sure that works. Data.data.children. Save that. Go back to our simulator. Okay, everything looks like it worked. Okay, it doesn't seem to console log anything. Let's see if it just works here. I'm sorry, I am in the wrong component. Sorry about that. Grab this. And this should go in the home screen. So I'll put it right here. And also the state. Yeah. this goes in our state. So posts is an empty array. Cool. Okay. Yes. See if this console logs, and it does. Cool. So our posts are set. Now we just have to change this to reflect the data coming in. So this state posts is the data. The image is item.data.thumbnail. Again, just go through the JSON that comes back. I've already done this. So, and for the key, there's actually an ID. So we can do item data ID. And for the name, it's now going to be item data title. See if that works. And there you go. Here are the latest posts from that subreddit. Cool. Okay, now we have to update what we're passing into the other screen. I also want to pass in the image along with the title. So let's go ahead and fix that. So up here, let's change this to title. And it should be item data title. And I also want to pass in the image source. So image src. And like I said, I already did this, so I already know how much to drill down. So this is another part of the API that just grabs a higher resolution image. Okay. So save that. And now on the other screen, let me just change this to the name. So this should be title, I mean. Now it should show the title. So this cow, okay. Now we just have to add the image. So let me just grab an image from here. Where's the image? Here it is. Grab that. Just put it under the button. Let's give it a width and a height of 100%. 100%. And the source is going to be this right here. But we're passing in the image source. So image src, and we'll just leave that blank and see if this works. There you go. There's the image. And we successfully made this mini Reddit clone. Cool. All right, let me quickly put in a loading state. So when the app first loads, you see there's a little pause there, and that can vary depending on your connection. So if you look back to React Native, there's a component called activity indicator, which is just a loading spinner. So I'm just going to grab this. Let's just put it in our code. So in here. So let's just put it right before our flat list. And let's import that. Activity indicator. See how that looks. Okay, so there it is. And we just have to make an additional state here and show it and hide it based on that. So initially, we are loading. And then we're not loading once our promise resolves from here. So loading is false here. And then now for our activity indicator, we just have to set it if it's, show it if it's loading. So we can just do an inline conditional here. So this dot state dot loading and that. That should do it. So if you look here quickly, there should be a spinner and it disappears once the promise resolves. Cool. So there you have it, guys. We've managed to take a look at the basics of React Native so you can get started in learning it to build out your mobile application. I'm a big fan of Expo and the way it enhances the developer experience, making it similar to building web applications. If you need more control, you can always eject and continue from there. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next one. Okay, thanks. Bye.